Well, he is on a two-day mission to help bring Serbia closer to the European Union as it seeks membership of the bloc. Emmanuel Macron is describing as historic, a deal that will see Belgrade purchase 12 French warplanes. The fighter jet agreement marks the latest in a series of moves that have seen Serbia seek closer ties with Brussels, but it's raised concerns about the possibility of Belgrade transferring technology to its traditional ally, Moscow. Tom Kennedy has more.
In the midst of a political crisis in France, Emmanuel Macron travelled to Belgrade to meet his counterpart Alexander Vučić to conclude the sale of 12 Rafale aircraft, a strategic and sensitive sale at a time when Serbia maintains diplomatic relations with Russia. But for Paris, the purchase of these fighter jets is a strategic change for Serbia, hailed on Thursday by the French president, who sees it as a way of contributing to strengthening Europe's autonomy.
This strategic autonomy, which we can consolidate together by strengthening our security, is not exclusive to the European Union, but also within the European political community and with countries destined to join the EU. This is why Serbia's choice of Rafale fighter jets is a clear choice, that of a long-term alliance between our two countries within a stronger, more sovereign Europe.
Macron claims to have received full guarantees from Vučić to prevent any transfer of Rafale technology to Russia or any pressure on Kosovo. It will be the second visit of the French president to Serbia in the last 5 years, following the strengthening of relations between the two countries.
For more, let's bring in Helena Ivanov. She's Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. Thank you so much for being with us on the programme, Helena. So we saw a little bit of the story there in that report. Tell us firstly, Serbia is seeking closer ties with the EU, but does that mean it's actually moving further from Russia?
Well, I think that President Vučić has been very clear when speaking during the press conference yesterday. He obviously restated Serbia's desire to join the European Union and the willingness of Serbia to take the necessary steps to join the EU. However, he has also highlighted that despite everyone's wishes and despite Macron's wishes in particular, Serbia is not going to impose sanctions on Russia. So on the basis of what we've seen yesterday, I think we can expect more of the same from the Serbian government, where on one hand, I'm sure they will continue to cooperate with the EU, take part in normalization talks with Kosovo mediated by the EU, take high state visits like the one that we are seeing for the last 2 days. But we can also expect that Serbia will continue to work and cooperate with Russia, and that at the very least, it is not going to impose sanctions on Russia anytime soon.
But in that case, if it isn't going to be applying those sanctions, as you say, how much pressure do you think is actually being applied behind the scenes when it comes to securing the deals that we saw secured yesterday in terms of these French fighter jets?
Well, I think that definitely the European Union is trying to exert as much pressure as possible on President Vučić to get him to impose sanctions on Russia, or at the very least, decrease the intensity of relations with Russia. When it comes to Rafale specifically, we have strong reasons to think that President Vučić will stay committed to his pledge and that he will not sell the technology to Russians. I think equally we can expect that he's not going to abuse it or misuse it against Kosovo, especially because if Vučić was to do any of these two things, the price for that would be extremely high. However, I also think that EU's ability to exert leverage on Serbia when it comes to imposing sanctions on Russia has been very limited, partly because the people in Serbia do not support imposing such sanctions on Russia. So I think in a way, the EU has accepted this dynamic that Vučić has been playing for a while now and is playing into this balancing act where it is allowing Serbia to continue the talks for joining the EU, is willing to cooperate and work with Serbia on one hand, but at the same time is sort of accepting that sanctions against Russia are really not on the table for Serbia.
But apart from those pledges, is there any way to actually ensure that Serbia isn't going to pass on certain technology to Moscow?
Well, I do think that, again, Serbia benefits quite a lot from being in the accession talks with the EU. I think that there are huge financial benefits of cooperation between Serbia and the EU. I think that when it comes to Kosovo as well, the normalization talks are basically one of the ways in which the Serbian community in the north remains protected. So I think all of these things accumulate to a very beneficial relationship with the EU that Serbia currently has. And of course, if Vučić was to dishonor the pledge that he has made, all of those benefits with the EU would be gone in a blink of a moment. So I do think that that is exactly the reason why Vučić has no interest to dishonor the pledge that he's made yesterday to President Macron.
And in terms of actually joining the EU, how close is Serbia to realising that objective?
Well, obviously, many would love to say that it is very close. However, I think on a closer inspection, that date is probably not coming anytime soon. I think the EU has been clear for quite some time right now that there is no appetite for enlargement and that Serbia needs to resolve certain issues, specifically Kosovo issue, before accession can really become an option. I think equally we have a huge problem that the popularity of the European Union is substantially decreasing in Serbia. According to some research, there is a chance that more people vote against joining the EU than in favor, all of which obviously complicates the accession. But to end on a more optimistic note, it was very surprising to hear President Macron yesterday say very explicitly that Serbia belongs to the EU. And given that President Macron was one of the people who thought it's not the time to enlarge now, this kind of a comment coming from him is definitely encouraging for all of those who hope to see Serbia join the EU anytime soon.
But is it making any real progress in terms of things like the rule of law, democratic reforms? These are some of the preconditions for membership.
Obviously, and that is exactly one of the things that the EU is demanding Serbia resolve, and Serbia, as of yet, has not completely resolved those problems. But the question is it going to be able to do that, and is the EU going to be willing, once Serbia hopefully does implement all of those reforms, will the EU then be willing to have Serbia join the bloc?
And in terms of Emmanuel Macron reaching out to Serbia, he's on a 2-day state visit there. Is this simply all about moving Serbia out of the Russian sphere of influence? What is in it for the EU, so to speak, and France particularly?
Well, I think that definitely one big step that the EU is hoping to make is to further, move Serbia away from Russia and towards the EU. I think the EU has been sort of trying this mixture of stick and carrot method in trying to get Serbia to move away from Russia. And this is, part of the carrot. The selling of the Rafales and the high-level state visit is always something that's very beneficial for Serbia. And I definitely think that's one of the reasons as to why President Macron has done this. But I also think that bilaterally, looking from, Serbia-France relations, there are also clear benefits to it. Like multiple different things are going to be discussed in the next 2 days. It's also, about artificial intelligence cooperation, about energy cooperation, about nuclear energy cooperation. So there are like specific things that will be discussed over the course of the 2-day visit that I think also benefit France and just generally improve the bilateral relations between France and Serbia.
Helena, we'll have to leave it there for now, but thank you so much for joining us on the programme this morning. That is Helena Ivanov, Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society.